Given these concerns, I want to focus on 3 ways that the rule is lacking and is likely to result in distortions and achieve much less progress than you may believe than the authors may believe it's going to achieve. The first is that is a need to recognize that pollution prevention technologies are very available within the chemical industry right now. An important report that was released last year by a think tank in New York named Inform looked at 29 chemical companies. They looked at them in the early 1980s and the early 1990s and compared their practices. And what they found was that companies can do quite a bit in the way of pollution prevention. Specifically, they found that in regard to air emissions, some of the highest degrees of reduction in waste can be achievable in the range of 80 to 85% reduction. They also found that pollution prevention can pay for itself very quickly, and that most of the pollution prevention measures that were applied by these particular chemical companies studied by Inform, the measures that they applied paid for themselves in less than 6 months. What this means is that if you have an averaging scheme that allows pollution prevention as an out from doing other kinds of control measures included in the rule, that those companies that are today operating in a wasteful and inefficient manner will simply by coming up to speed in becoming baseline efficient in terms of not wasting, just throwing out materials, these companies will be able to do that and nothing more. We don't know. It's a very complicated rule. It's hard to say exactly how much of an out this would be within the whole rule. It's hard to quantify overall, but if you within the Inform analysis and talking with the authors of the report, they concluded that the Office of Technology Assessments estimate that with an aggressive government program to promote pollution prevention, we could have an overall 50% reduction in waste over 5 years. That may have been a pessimistic rather than an optimistic estimate, and that therefore one way of thinking about it is that without mandating pollution prevention through this rule and having it instead as a loophole, the rule may be 50% or more weaker than it needs to be. The second distortion in the rule, the second problem that we encounter is that there are other rules that this industry is going to, I want to focus you on part of this slide. There are other rules that the industry is also going to have to comply with in the future, and without encouraging a focus on pollution prevention opportunities and the costs overall between the different rules, and not focusing on possible process changes to avoid these rules entirely, the incremental costs of these 2 rules will add up and will just be added on without really considering the opportunities to do something further reaching that eliminates the use of poisons and the production of poisons in the industries. And the third one that I don't have a slide for because I've been realizing how big a distortion this one is just today, is the focus on continuous processes and not batch processes will probably encourage some companies who are considering what they should do next and what kind of production they should do. They'll shift to batch processes where they can because there's no regulation of batch processes under this rule. And, you know, in the hope that they can get 5 or 10 years of less regulated production. One of the big problems with that is that batch processes can be much more waste intensive because every time a batch is changed, you have to flush out the lines. That creates more waste. So the question is what to do to correct some of these problems. And basically, what I would suggest is needed is a more thorough look at technology options as part of the implementation of this, as well as the elimination of the loopholes and the unenforceable aspects of the rule. In the Inform study, they found that chemical companies that had 3 particular policies in place did by far the most pollution prevention, and those were cost accounting for materials and pollution to all media, employee participation programs, and plant manager and environmental manager joint leadership to promote source reduction. In addition, states that have pollution prevention programs in place, and I'm thinking of 5 states or 6 states that have planning requirements for industries, emphasize 2 other core features in a good pollution prevention program. And those are evaluation of source reduction alternatives and public participation programs. Specific mechanisms that I would say are needed in the MAC rule. The first is requiring these kinds of management practices to maximize awareness and assessment of the feasibility of these further reaching changes within our industries, and evaluating those alternatives through a planning process, and then giving preference to the further reaching pollution prevention strategies over end of the pipe controls where they prove to be feasible. And I'm specifically concerned that if there are emissive type technologies that are being used as the control measures, there should be a real clear breaking line in the rule that says you first have to show that these other measures are not feasible. And finally, because it's in the interest of communities as well as interest of companies and government to make these changes, it's important that the evaluation process, the plans, and the decision-making be a democratic process, one that workers and communities have a direct opportunity to participate in. Without that level of scrutiny, companies may nevertheless try to continue their old ways without opening up the process and eliminating the insularity of current corporate decision-making. Thank you very much.
Before we go to the next speaker, I'd like to clarify. The rule applies to batch processes. What does not apply to are batch vents, and that's going to be addressed in a future rulemaking. Other aspects of batch operations are covered.
Okay. I think, Mike,
Yeah,
you had a
I
question.
had one, just a follow-up question. Earlier I think one of your slides, you mentioned that you thought that some of the control devices might actually be generating dioxin. I assume you referred to the flares that could be used. Do you have data on that you could submit to us?
On the amount of dioxin?
Yeah.
I'm sure that there is data on that somewhere. I don't have it right offhand. Actually, maybe Dr. Silbergeld has something on that. But we could try to get some.
Yeah, if you have data, please submit it to the docket with written comments. And we do not allow halogenated materials to be flared in this rule. They have to use an acid gas scrubber following a combustion device. So consider that when you submit the information. The next speaker is Robert Weigel of the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund.
Right here behind.
Good evening. I'm Robert Weigel. I'm an attorney with the Sierra Club Legal Defense Fund based out of New Orleans. We're a public interest law firm, so we deal with a lot of people that live around chemical plants, a lot of people that live up and down the chemical corridor, Cancer Alley between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. It's getting late. We're going to submit technical comments on this thing in writing. So let me just share a couple of practical points with you now, if I could. When I first saw the 1990 amendments to the Clean Air Act and saw that they were going to put a MAC standard, Maximum Achievable Control Technology, into place, it sounded great. It sounded really good. It's Maximum Achievable Control Technology. When we got this rule and we saw it, we saw that there are a lot of exemptions in there. You get to average your toxics emissions over a year, so that you can emit more than you're allowed to under the MAC standard during one part of the year. If you do less in another part, you can trade a rise in a more hazardous substance for a decrease in a less hazardous substance. I was baffled, and these things apparently were put in there in the name of giving operational flexibility to industry. If there is one thing that I've observed about the people that live around these plants, the people that work in these plants, it's that they don't have any operational flexibility. They have to breathe about 24 times a minute, regardless. That That is what they have to do to keep ticking. I would suggest there's an old legal principle that might help this rule out, which is that your right to swing your fist stops where your neighbor's nose starts. And these plants have been swinging some pretty heavy fists, a lot of their neighbors, for quite a long time. And there are ways in which this rule could address that a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Dr. Thomas Callender here?
He's not here. We have 3 people from the Garden City Community Group. They're not on the list that are going to take that spot.
Okay.
Give your name to the court reporter.
Sure. My name is Liddell Hannon. I live in the Garden City area along Scenic Highway here in Baton Rouge. And I want to take time out to tell a real horror story. We've heard all of these statistics and, you know, the cause and effects of chemicals. And, you know, this is not something that we're going to watch on HBO. This is not a tale from the crib. I'm talking about what actually goes on in Garden City. On some days, you can go out in the morning if you own a car and look on the top of it and you notice these white particles, great particles. I'm talking about an area right across the street from 5 chemical companies, including the Exxon refinery, copolymer, the Rose plant, Allied Chemical. And there have been, to be very brief, there are a lot of accidents along here, what they say, accidental releases. And, you know, this horror story has even reached my own house. I have a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 13-year-old. I have a wife. And incidentally, regardless of what some people might think, lifestyle does not have anything to do with it, because my 2-year-old and 4-year-old do not smoke cigarettes. However, the 2-year-old has a high lead content in his blood. The 4-year-old, every time she's allowed to come out in the yard, she breaks out in rashes. And yes, I'm a member of an organization called Garden City Community Alliance. We did a health survey along about a 20-block area. We passed out more than 400 health questionnaires. And upon returning them, I'm talking about 90% of them people who were suffering from ear infections, eye infections, skin rashes. We're talking about an area 4 blocks away from 5 major chemical companies. And regardless of what some people might say, these chemical companies are not over-regulated. On one street alone, there were 3 couples have died within the past 6 months. Not 3 people, 3 couples, husband and wives, have died. And it's not a myth about cancer, Ellie. It really lives, it exists, and I urge you to just don't, you know, pictures worth 1,000 words. Knock on any door, you know. Just come out there and do your own survey. They've done survey after survey, but I don't think one has been conducted not in our immediate area. 90% of the people there are affected by some type of ailment, whether it be minor or whether it be major. But I guess the real horror story is the high cancer death. And, you know, we're talking about water, air, and ground pollution. You know, there's even a high level of noise pollution. If you go to sleep at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, the roaring, the smokestacks, you know, people can't even rest long there. And, you know, I guess it's a constant reminder of the 1989 December 24th explosion at Exxon, which killed one of their own workers. And, you know, this is just not a one-time occurrence. On September 21st of last year, there was a toxic release at Allied. 1 hour later, they informed the neighborhood that they probably wasn't in any danger. An hour later. And you know, it's a potential for a major, I'm talking about a major disaster in this area. You know, you got to consider, and it's not a joke, there's a scenario where the airport is about 3 miles away. You know, considering all these carcinogens, I've heard Ms. Robinson give statistic after statistic about what's actually released over there. You know, what really happens if a 747 falls on copolymer or the Exxon refinery? I'm sorry, you know, we won't be around to tell the results. You know, just to name a few, she talked about benzene, butadiene, formaldehyde, methylketone, styrene, toluene, and acetaldehyde. You know, these are cancer-causing chemicals. Okay, we know that's a real tragedy in itself. But what about the ones that don't cause cancer? What about the damage to kidneys, liver, and lungs from long-time exposure to stuff is acetone and formaldehyde and chlorine? What about the stuff that causes birth defects and damage to your reproductive organs, such as trichloroethane, benzene, and the toluene and lead? You know, and this we're not talking about. I'm not trying to overemphasize anything, but they are vastly underregulated, and I think the statistics in Garden City kind of live up to that. And it's a sad thing when you have to think that a dollar bill is worth more than the human life, you know. And, you know, I got to question that theory. I think that they can actually be real productive and get zero emissions. And for the sake, there are other people who want to testify here tonight. We really need some relief, and we need something now, you know, without further delay. You know, we can go through the changes we're talking about, the bureaucracy, and to put the politics in it, and special interests. You know, I think the only interest is the concern of the neighborhood, the people who are really and mostly affected by it. We are vastly impacted by the emissions there, both ground, air, water, and even the noise pollution. I urge you to just consider some of the testimony you've heard here tonight. And I have two other people that would like to add to that from Garden City.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Joan Forbes, and I live in the Garden City area of Baton Rouge. This area surrounds industrial plants. I have lived there for over 18 years. I'm the mother of 4 kids, aged 26, 22, 18, and 16, and 1 grandchild, now 10 months old. My oldest daughter lives in Fort Worth, Texas. She can no longer come home for a visit because if she stays in my house for 2 to 3 days, she gets ill. She develops asthmatic bronchitis and other respiratory illnesses. She tried to come home last Easter and stay with me because she was pregnant. She took ill, she went to a specialist, and the specialist told her it was best for her to leave my home because of the chemicals in the area surrounding the plant. She left and went back to Fort Worth, Texas. 3 weeks later, she had her baby prematurely. The baby came for a visit this December. She tried to stay with me again to visit for the Christmas holidays. Within 3 days, the baby had the symptoms of asthmatic bronchitis, and she had an infection on her lungs. Therefore, they had to leave and go stay with my mother. They went to, how I know the chemicals in the air are causing this because my son-in-law's father lives around the plants in the Chalmette area. They went to visit them. They emitted, the they immediately got sick again. Due to the pollution in the air from Exxon USA plants and other plants around Scenic Highway, the residents in the neighborhood next to those plants are experiencing a number of illnesses and allergies. Examples are as follows: itching, red swelling of the skin, hives, headaches, respiratory problems, and other allergies. There is also a high rate of cancer and related illnesses occurring every day. Exxon and other plants are still minimizing and denying these problems. They reject constructive confrontation from our community that is meant as a good neighbor policy. It is their way or no way at all. It seems like our community does not matter to them. As Mr. Hannon said, we sent out a health questionnaire in the area. We received back 400 replies or more. After going over the health questionnaires, we found that there were 35% ear infections in the area, 39% rashes of the skin, 21% asthma, 43% eye or vision problems, 46% allergies, 58% headaches, 30% respiratory problems, on and on. Also, we had a 4% cancer rate, 14% heart problems, and 5% seizures, coughing spells, and other related illnesses. We also have reading disabilities in children and a number of birth defects in children. Truly, environmental racism is at hand. We're asking these companies and the environmental people to clean up the area. Illnesses are becoming more prevalent. People are dying. Crime is raging. The community consumes pollution 52 weeks and 365 days annually. Management consumes less than 8 hours per day. Plants are the cause of our property devaluation. Industry is monopolizing real estate in the area surrounding the plant. Plants are still minimizing and denying these problems exist. At this time, I am in the process of selling my home to Exxon for a minimum price because I can no longer stay there because of the illnesses. I regret doing that because I have been there 18 years, but I feel my family is more important than money and breathing that bad air anymore. I thank you.
How you doing?
How you, sir?
My name is Brother Robert Joseph. I'm pastor of the King's Children's Church, which is in the Garden City area, 3024 Amarillo Street. And I'm president of the Garden City Community Alliance organization. We're here tonight to talk about our problem in the neighborhood. Our area basically runs from Airline Highway on the north to Chippewa on the south, Scenic Highway on the west, and Plank Road on the east. And as they're telling you that we have found many, many illnesses there, but bringing it a little closer to home, I live on a street that's 1 block long, approximately 20 houses. At least half of those people have died with cancer, and at least 4 more people have died with massive heart attacks. We can attest to the odors, to the noise, to the rumbling, to the flaring through the night and on weekends. Out on the main thoroughfare, which is Hollywood, in the first 2 blocks, we have a family who lost their mother and father to cancer, Mr. and Mrs. Jackson. In the second block, we have another family that lost their mother and father to cancer. In fact, these were members of our organization, and for Thanksgiving, Mrs. Red died with cancer, and for Christmas, Mr. Red died with cancer. We're saying to the EPA that we don't understand how you come up with what is allowable. What can we allow to be emitted to the air? One of my closing statements, I would like to say that the plants were built predominantly on the river, and they were on the west side of the Kansas City Southern Railroad, and there was a buffer zone between the plants and the neighborhood. The neighborhood did not build up on top of the plants. The plants built to the neighborhood. And for 80 years now, there has been petrochemical industry across Scenic Highway, and now we are saying that we're good neighbors, and yet we have not informed the people in the neighborhood about the chemicals that are being emitted. People are uninformed in the neighborhood, and my understanding of SARA 3 and EPA was that the people should be informed. People cannot make a good real estate investment not knowing what carcinogens or what have you are being emitted from the petrochemical industry, when we hear on one side that we cannot say what effect the petrochemical industry has upon a human being. And then we say that it's because of our lifestyle, it's because of what we eat, it's because of what we smoke down here and so on. But true to life is when 93 million pounds of toxic emissions are being emitted to the air, that has a cause and effect upon cancer and upon people's health. Amen. And as we state that the plants built to the neighborhood and caused the neighborhoods to depreciate, and people who are better informed moved out, and then you wind up with your lower income people, predominantly black and poor whites, living around these neighborhoods, and they are powerless, and they don't have any way of moving out, and they're just in a catch-22. I think EPA should have somewhere told the plants that you cannot build up into these neighborhoods, and you must maintain a certain amount of space between your operation and the immediate neighborhood. And I think that must be said, must be done, especially if EPA says that 1 in 100, it's 1 in 100 times greater that a person will experience cancer if he lives within 1 mile of an operating unit from petrochemical industry. I think that EPA needs to do more to create a better harmony and a better buffer zone between the petrochemical industry and the neighborhood, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
I don't know if this is Les Ann or Leanne Kirkland, Elizabeth Avance from Aware.
My name is Les Ann Kirkland. I'm co-leader of an environmental group in Iberville Parish called Aware. We formed in 1986, and I was active for 5 years. Been in semi-retirement for 2 years, because you don't get paid to do that work. I was doing 40 to 120 hours a week unpaid. And now I'm recuperating financially. The 28th will be a 7-year anniversary for our group, and I have plans to kind of ease back in, and tonight was my time to ease back in, and I wasn't going to say anything because I don't believe in coming to a hearing unprepared, and I haven't read this permit. I've just skimmed a few things, or not permit, whatever you want, whatever the terminology is. But I was just going to sit in the back, but I've been moved to speak 11 days early, moved by despair. By the time the second speaker came up, I realized that we were saying the same things and jumping through the same hoops that we were jumping through 2 years ago, and the same ones 7 years ago, and it's really discouraging. I mean, I've only been doing this since '86. I can imagine how the people who've been doing this 10 and 20 years longer than I have been feel. You know, we keep making these new rules, and I don't think the key is the new rules. I think the key is you give them a certain amount of time to get there, and then they don't, and then you come up with a new thing. I mean, I think we can pick any set of rules or any program that's been put forward in the last 10 years, and if we just make them do it, you know, we don't have to go on anymore. It's a great feeling of futility, but we're not going to stop. We were here first. You know, if I get nothing but a rush job through the pearly gates for this, well, I can say I tried. If I address you and say you in a negative manner, you know if it applies. If it doesn't apply, I want you to send it back to whoever it applies to at EPA with the same emotion that I'm delivering it to you. So don't take it personally if it doesn't apply. I hope one day, you know, we just wear y'all down, or either replace you with someone who does what we really need. It's hard for you to know where our motivation comes from because you don't live by the blowing stacks, and I do. And it's, even if you live there for a little while, you still wouldn't know because your roots wouldn't be there, and if you were lucky enough to ever have kids, you wouldn't be thinking of them having to deal with that. And I think that's why the people in Washington don't have the same sense of urgency that we have here. You know, we're dealing, what's blowing out of the stack right now in Plaquemine, some of these things, the latency periods are 30 years. You know, the cancer's not, you know, if my little cousin is driving by there who's 3 and she gets her lethal dose, you know, she might not get her cancer for another 20 years. We gotta stop now. We behind already. Your fact sheet, I took a look at it and it's not numbered. That's a little aggravating thing I got. Y'all don't number y'all pages, and I can't go through them when I'm trying to tell y'all about them, or so y'all can whip through to the page, you know. Like I said, I didn't get to read everything, but I object to the fact that there won't be any monitoring for boilers and process heaters. And I think when you list what you are going to regulate, you should list what you're not going to regulate. I also object to the fact that the parties outside EPA who were involved in doing this were the Chemical Manufacturers Association and the American Petroleum Institute. I object to that. I also think about these debits and credits, banking credits, and you suggesting 2 to 5 years that they can bank these credits. I don't want them to bank any credits. I mean, this is not a hotel taking reservations here. Y'all need to hang a sign out, you know. No, we're not going to let you save up stinking air to subject these other people to later. And trading, I mean, it's like childish. The way it's written up, it makes me think about when you were little, trading your steely for somebody's cat's eye. Now, we're not talking about marbles here. And until we get somebody to sign on the dotted line that they want to be that person in that risk assessment, that 1 in 1 jillion that's going to die of cancer, until we can get somebody to step up and sign on the line, well then those equations are not valid. St. Gabriel. St. Gabriel's in my parish, and we haven't forgotten, and we're not going to forget about the situation that's going on over there. The same things that were going on 4, 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago are still going on. St. Gabriel is still blowing his horn, and his warning hasn't been heeded. Anytime that the reproductive system in men or women is impaired or shut down or targeted by chemicals, I mean, we're being sent a message that our environment is so polluted that it can't even support a new life. It's polluted indiscriminately. Especially through creative literature, which is the little bit that I read in this thing. That's what it was. I call it creative literature. I mean, we still have a lot of people who have couples that can't conceive, and large numbers of miscarriages, and children who are born sick, and we got some weird chemicals made down here. They're capable of crossing the placenta and attacking the child in the womb. If you lived here and had suffered the way that we've suffered, I could tell you right now to follow your consciences. You know, if your friends were on a jar, you know, every convenience store you go in, there's somebody on a jar that has cancer. They can't afford the trip to St. Jude's. Smiling child's in the picture. He doesn't know why he's dying. And sometimes the parents don't even know. But they don't have the money to deal with it. That's in any convenience store. But since I can't tell you to follow your consciences, and I really don't believe that you know the extent of our problem down here, even though I think that everyone who's spoken before me has given an excellent crash course. I mean, we've had so many wonderful speakers. I just want to say that the federal government gets 20% of my paycheck every week, and I'm not rich, and I need the money for myself. You work for the federal government, and since I fund them, you work for me. And as my employer, I'm telling you what I want.
Thank you.
I want the numbers to come down. I don't care how you get them down. Through this program, through an old program. I mean, the Fed set this non-attainment program in place in '76. Iberville Parish, where I come, we've never attained it yet, but they still blowing and going. They still giving him permission to make more. I have one more comment, but you want to say something first?
No, I just want to suggest that perhaps you could start concluding your remarks so some other people could speak.
This is my conclusion right here. The last thing that I wanted to say was I really think that we should, and it is the last thing that I wanted to say. I'm not cutting my comment short. I want you, if it's through this program, through another program, whatever, I want you to phase out the production of known carcinogens. I know it sounds simplistic, but it's immoral, and it has to stop. The one I'm particularly interested in is vinyl chloride. We make more of it in Plaquemine than anywhere else in the world, more in Louisiana than anywhere else in the country. It causes all sorts of weird cancers, all sorts of weird disease states like acrostiolisis and scleroderma and reproductive problems, and miscarriage, a chemical for all seasons. The list of what it doesn't cause is shorter than what it does cause.
Thank you.
And that's what I would like you to do. Thank you.
Before I get started, let me get this behind me because I'm angry. I'm angry that you told my co-leader to cut it short.
Well,
Everybody is important, and these comments are very important.
Yes, they are. Other people would like to speak too, and we'd just like you to stay within a reasonable time period.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth A. Vance, and I am co-leader of Alliance Against Waste in Action to Restore the Environment, better known as AWARE. First, I wish to thank the Environmental Protection Agency for holding this meeting on the Hazardous Organic National Emission Standard for Hazardous Air Pollutants, HON, here in Baton Rouge, which is situated in the chemical corridor known as Cancer Alley. My group is based in Iberville Parish, which is located southwest of East Baton Rouge Parish. My home is in Plaquemine. My address is shared by Dow Chemical, Georgia Gulf, Sibagagi, three well-known air polluters, so famous that they usually make most lists. My parish is also home to B.F. Goodrich, Ashland Chemical, Air Products, ICI Americas, and United Texas Petroleum, to name a few. Cohabitation, coexistence are difficult, to say the least, when the known or suspected medical conditions and disease states listed on material safety data sheets are daily realities. Two communities reveal